Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this fireside chat. We know how pandemic really changed our workplaces, which is why we are here meeting virtually and not physically. And workplaces are undergoing tremendous changes and obviously posing new challenges for people who are in at the helm of affairs to deal with. The biggest challenge which is coming is from the technology side, which is posing newer challenges on how to keep people relevant, how to ensure that your jobs are relevant, how to changing the work environment completely. Thank you all for joining us. And if I could start with, Jyoti. Uh, Jyoti, how do you really see future of the workplace now with, the kind of shifts that we are seeing in terms of technology and in terms of the disruptions that we have been seeing?
Firstly, thanks a ton, Deepshikha, for having me here. It's a pleasure to be with such a nice and wonderful panel. Thanks, Pallab, and thanks, Shuchika, also. To answer your question, I think the disruption is not at a very high end the way we have seen it yet, because we've not gone back to a physical workspace again. We've not been there yet on a full-time basis the way we used to be. So we are yet to witness that kind of a disruption, if you may say, after a COVID space. But having said that, the kind of disruption that we saw in daily living in the past 1.5 years is a transformation towards a digitized culture or a digital culture. The way technology has been embedded in our lives and in the way we work, in the way we understand things, has completely changed the way we work. The future of work is genuinely changed with the disruption of technology being embedded at a workplace. And that is what we need to build. As I was going through various studies, Gartner has already said that there is 52% of CHROs who feel that technology is really invaded and changed the way we work, but only 19% of them are prepared to imbibe that kind of disruption. So technology is something which should embrace, and we have always embraced it, but the way it has come to us as a future workspace and to the future talent, if I may use the word, and the employees, it's going to see a major shift. And at that point in time, I think we should have a digital culture. And digital culture is a new coined word that is emerging as one of the places of being futuristic workplace.
Pallab, if I can come to you, where do you see workplaces headed?
Thanks again, Deepshikha and team ETHR for having me on this panel. Uh, the workplace, how it's headed is quite is like Jyoti said. It changed a lot, and probably it's going to change even more in the future. But if we pause for a moment and ask that employee as to what is happening to you, then we may get some answers related to that, right? So the first is that from a 9 to 5, probably he's moved on to working anytime. From an office, he's probably moved on to working anywhere. From using a company desktop, he's probably moved on to using any device that he wants. Today, his work probably is his job description per se is a lot more customized than compared to what it was earlier. So those are certain changes that the employee is seeing at his level. Like you said, we are meeting virtually. Now, if someone was to ask this 3 years ago that, whether or not you would be okay with a board meeting happening virtually, people would have squirmed. And here we have done, I think 4 quarters without any physical meeting at the board. So that's what's happening. So yeah, the water cooler conversations are missing, but yeah, but work has changed. Digital is playing a key role. Digital will continue to play a key role. Technology has been so, there's another thing, that we have been actually talking about this for some time, that, how is technology going to hit you, this and that. What I think, the pandemic did is that gave us that rude shock, gave us that, if I may use that word correctly or incorrectly, opportunity, where, you had no option but to very quickly transform yourself to a digital organization. So probably those are certain things that have undergone tremendous change in the last 1.5 years.
Shuchika, if I could come to you, we know that there are these changes. COVID pandemic changed a whole lot of things. The whole dynamics of the workplaces changed. Even as we were experiencing this change on the automation side. So, going forward, uh, what kind of challenges, as in terms of people adjustments? I mean, it's all about human resources. How what do they have to do? What kind of preparedness do they have to bring about to ensure, there is a job for them in the future workplace, and also you as a leader in that place, what kind of preparedness would you want them to have to actually be relevant in the workplace?
So I think we've segued into the skill piece already. How do employees prepare themselves? But I just want to, Deepshikha, take a moment to talk about some of the trends I have observed due to the pandemic. A lot of that was covered by my esteemed panel members. I just want to cover one or two things. Having being HR head for a global organization for the last 7 months, I actually joined without meeting any of the interviewers face to face, whether it was the CEO or the promoter or his group head HR or whatever. So that was a very interesting experience personally. And the entire recruitment for everybody in the last 1.5 years or onboarding globally, that has shifted digital, and everybody's talked about that. I saw some more pieces happening around me. One is this uh, employee awareness, and I'm going to move into skill. Employee today, when you talk to someone in the US or UK or India, have become more nuanced after the COVID. They've started to question their choices much more. Do I need to have commute? Do I need to go back to office? What does that mean if my colleague sitting next to me is not vaccinated and holds a very strong opinion on vaccination? So we've already moved from a let's get used to a pandemic to this stage where let's get used to everything. So in a world where employee has suddenly there's a shift in employee perception. I think skilling technology is going to be moving rapidly. Skilling is going to become very important. And I think skilling is at two levels. I do not just think employees have to skill themselves. I think we as leaders, we as organizations have to have a very different muscle now to attract, retain, and create that employee value proposition. I mean, the biggest leadership skill that got called for last year was, of course, technology, but also empathy and understanding on what everybody is going through and how do you sort of create that ecosystem for work to happen with what everybody was facing personally. The other shift that I have also seen is that the first time I think organizations, HR, and leaders have been a little bit okay returning to the welfare state, saying that we take care of people. We don't just do business. We do things that help people in a very meaningful way. Like money went where the mouth was, or whether it was COVID benefit or sort of benefits for deceased and all of that. And I think that's there to stay. I also think that it also, we've been talking of stuff like diversity and inclusion, impact sourcing for more than 2 decades, but pandemic exposed how, if the society and the infrastructure and the government doesn't move in tandem, uh, a pandemic exposes those gaps. So we had more women leaving workforce in places like US and UK because there was no childcare, and they sort of were the primary caregivers. So I think all of this not just poses questions around skilling that's emerging from technology, it poses a lot of questions around the whole employee value proposition. I mean, you come tell people you come with your whole self to work, but that would mean that they are asking you questions. Okay, what about childcare? Okay, what about vaccination policy? And just particularly focusing on skilling, my and I don't think I'm in a position to advise, but my big advice would be that jobs that are really repetitive are going away. They were going away before pandemic. They are accelerating. So and I head HR for an organization where work is predominantly people related, operations related, and a lot of technology, rapid progress to technology. And I think everybody sitting on a desk doing a piece of job that could be automated has to start thinking about what is my relationship with technology, how digitally am I oriented, how can I make sense of the data that's coming on my table on customer, and how do I make sense of that data to serve the customer better. Half the time your clients come to you with an idea of value, and how do you drive that value for them through technology. If it has to be low cost and high value, it needs to be technology driven, and that innovation needs to happen on each desk. So I would call that skill in a big way across organizations. Deepshikha, I'm going to pause because my enthusiasm takes the better of me, and I'm sure you've got to ask other questions as well.
Yes, I want to come to Pallab. Pallab, from a brick and mortar, huge branch, banks, financial sectors now sort of getting restricted to mobile phones. As even as we sort of expand footprint, the reach is increasing for the financial sector in the rural hinterland. So, in terms of the financial sector, where do you see how is this whole change, this automation really impacting the jobs? How is it impacted the workplace? And what are the kind of measures that organizations say in the sector are sort of really taking to adjust to this new normal or this new technological changes or the revolution that's sort of coming about?
You're right. It's just a question of time before your entire life, financial services, your entire life will be on your watch, right? It's today on a phone, but just a question of time. It's going to be on your watch, and that will be, your finances, your entertainment, your maybe schooling, and what else, right? Um, Having said that, would that mean that human interaction would become irrelevant? And that probably is a big no, because human beings per se are social animals. Like, what did we miss most during the pandemic? What we missed most was interacting with each other on an informal basis, the interaction and the collaboration and matters related to that. So I don't think the branches will go away in a hurry. The rate of expansion of branches could definitely come down. Um, so that's on the place of work. On the business side, I think there will be three elements, right? Which is product, process, and people. That's how the thing. So in products, like we did, we had something called a selfie account, right? Which basically means that you take a selfie and you do your account opening practically on your own, from the comfort of wherever you are. And it was a big hit, right? You are aware that the banking sector is flush with liquidity, and the liquidity came not by people physically coming in to, give give the money. It all came in through the virtual route. So. So product undergoes the change. The process as to how the person is getting the job done, that undergoes a change. So what happens to the people? The people obviously needs to understand this new normal, right? So in fact, it was during the pandemic that we did a complete overhaul of several systems, like the microfinance, which forms around 18% of our book. There we did the core business per se, the core business software that moved from something to br.net, which is the go-to software today. So we did this entire change virtually. So therefore, the platform was implemented, and from a people side, the entire workforce, which is, I guess, around 4,500 people, got trained virtually, right? So no longer, so he's getting trained virtually on a software that he's never used, and then going to the customer who are not necessarily urban customers for us, uh, and getting those customers onboarded, getting them to transact, getting them to collect through those through the new software. So it's undergone a complete change. On the skilling piece, if I may say so, what has happened is that we have democratized learning today. Yesterday, you have to do this, savings bank product, then only something will happen to you, is gone. Today the employee is much more aware. I think, as Shuchika said, that the employee is becoming much more aware, much more vocal about his or her needs. So he or she knows that this is what I need to kind of grow, and therefore all things that he needs to learn is on a platform which he can access through either his mobile or desktop or laptop, whatever he has or whatever he wants to use. So that's the second part that's happening. The third part that's happening is this career architecture. Career architecture, again, is, it used to be, you have to go 2 steps up, 3 steps down, 5 steps sideways, then only can you become a CEO. Sorry, that's again gone. And people are doing, wanting to do different things. People are willing to experiment. People are willing to take accountability for their career. So, and all that the organization is expected to do is allow them to have access to the tools that he or she needs to make that grow. So those are, and that's what we are doing. We are doing some partnerships. We are doing some offering them courses on much more with gamified manner, and which typically happens. So all those are happening, but from an employee perspective, I think these are the changes that happen.
Jyoti, if I can come to you, Pallab mentioned this transition which the financial sector, and he said, the branches are here to stay, even though, there is this shift which is happening. Now, in terms of the pace of automation, we know the technology is here, and all sectors are going to sort of see a larger technological interface, and also the technology is also changing. So, on the pace of this automation, the whole technology, the way it's going to impact the workplaces, that's, one cannot predict it. So, in terms of the pace, how should it be paced, the whole process? And for an organization, which is actually looking at the future, so what should be the key focus areas?
Okay. I agree to what Pallab also mentioned, that the career architecture has completely changed. I would want to put some more thoughts there. But coming back to your question, I think these things cannot be paced. That's not what I think, because something like COVID just happened. None of the CHROs had even the experience, expertise, or the time to go ahead and do anything. It just kept coming on. So any kind of disruption or any kind of things that just gets uh, dawned to you cannot be paced. You either uh, learn it quickly while implementing things, or you go ahead and garner people's support and implement such things. So pacing out, I do not think how much can be, it can be a planned pacing or whatever. You can just take inputs, observe, and go ahead and do. And that's what the pandemic actually taught us this time. What are the skills, or what is the kind of requisite skills or something like that which would be required in the future? I think having seen what we've seen, uh, and also the I think we, apart from COVID, we are also at the juncture of a shift of generation. Every 30 years, 25 years, a generation shifts. And we had the millennials and the Generation Z coming into. So the advent had already happened when COVID struck. So when there is a kind of shift in terms of generation, and when there is something as huge as a pandemic, the whole gamut in terms of competency, skills, culture uh, is on a complete roller change. Digital culture, generation change always brings as a skill that is requisite in terms of empowerment culture, in terms of what Pallab said as career architecture. The way we used to have career architecture is no longer relevant. Collaborative skills, data driven approach, um, innovation, innovation at its fullest. And the underlying pin has to always be technology in such a kind of juncture that we are there. And with innovation, I would like to add that a mindset shift is important. And that's where Pallab highlighted where a learning culture and different kind of learning culture comes into play. So I think these are the requisites that would be required uh, in the future at the context of a generation and a digital culture.
Would you like to add to what Jyoti said in terms of the change? Can as in a leadership position, can leaders really pace the change? Do they have the option of doing that? Or and how should the organizations, what should they really be focusing on, when they are actually planning to sort of adjust to whatever these changes, or when they're planning to carry about these changes?
So look, I completely agree with Jyoti. Pace cannot be planned. I mean, I'm sure that slide that everybody read through, I think it came from Josh Bersin or someone, became very famous on what is the pace of change. So technology changes first. It comes into social space the second. It comes into consumer space. It then hits the organization, and then it hits the government. So that's sort of the curve of any change. And organizations are like a level or two below how individuals interact with technology, and then organizations sort of bring it in. And I'm just generalizing this. That's not true for a lot of organization. A lot of innovations happen in organization. So pace is uncontrollable. You look what happened with COVID. But I really think that sense making and planning is really important, because we are talking about large scale shifts, and the future is here. It's not a shift that's going to happen 5 years hence. It started. And you also have to recognize that some skills are fungible, and those will be easy to train people to. But suddenly, if you need storytelling skills across the organization, or sense making skills across the organization, it you suddenly can't have hardcore people who were doing operations to suddenly get skilled on that, right? So there is a math in all of this. There is a matrix in all of this on what is low skill, what is medium skill, what are skills closer to each other, what is the pace of atrophy of each skill, and what is the pace of needing other skills in the organization. And there is that planning which is absolutely possible. We know what we know repetitive jobs will go, we know digitization will become big, we know skills around inclusion. Jyoti spoke about innovation, and the only way innovation thrives is when you create inclusive teams. To me, the underlying behavior is absolutely inclusion, and then technology on the back of that, or you do innovation on the back of technology or whatever. So some skills have already come at the workplace. You've got to harness them better, and you have to have a plan around that. And I think leadership is changing. Leadership that used to be so top down has to now be vulnerable in saying, I don't know, in creating that condition across the organization, saying that let's talk about what's important for future and what we know now, and be agile about it, right? Like, we started a number of projects, and some of them went very fast because they were needed, and some of them were not needed. They were pipe dreams, or probably a problem being solved too soon, or a problem being solved too fast, and we scrapped them. We said this is not necessary at this moment. So that agility and that vulnerability on the part of leaders when everything is being scrutinized in the social space is also important, because this is the fourth industrial revolution, to be honest. We're going through that change, and we just need to get on with what we know and learn from what we don't know. That's what I would say. I don't know if that answered your question, Deepshikha.
Yeah, to quite an extent, Shuchika. So if I
I'll
could
just
come,
add,
sure.
Deepshikha, if I may, to what Shuchika just said. While this revolution is still on, the one thing that comes across as leaders, or which needs to be imbibed, is reverse mentoring. And that is one thing that's taking a little bit of space, if I may use that word. And it also helps in revolutionizing the way leadership has been and acting. So reverse mentoring is one of the key things, along with empowerment culture. These two things, to what Pallab also had earlier said, that the way we are working has completely changed, and people make their own decisions whether they want to sit next to somebody in a bus or whatever. So empowerment culture and reverse mentoring are the two things that would be a requisite, or is already happening as we see in the future of workplace.
Right. In terms of reverse mentoring that you talked about, do you see the kind of openness or the kind of receptibility that is required within the leadership across workplaces? Is that something
So,
which is, or is it still like sort of you getting there kind of a thing?
so
Can I
sorry, Sachika.
go ahead,
Uh,
Jyoti? Come in.
so I think that's where I contextualized it earlier, saying that in the juncture of a complete generation having shifted, you are juxtaposed at that point where you have no choice. You will have to imbibe reverse mentoring. A very senior employee or a very senior leader with a junior employee needs to collaborate and work together to understand both sides, else the context is lost. So reverse mentoring is all about having two generations literally sitting together and imbibing each other's thought and collaborating in the real sense of it. And that leadership skill is what has, I think it's coming to fore. And like the COVID, we'll have to adapt to it, I think.
True.
Over
So
to
you
you,
were
Suchika.
saying something.
Yeah, look, just absolutely endorse what Jyoti is saying. I think one of the reasons some of these things fail or they become a fad is that we as HR people get terribly programmatic about it. Get people in a room and now do reverse mentoring. I learned the underbelly of internet and from a group of youngsters on the floor in the bank where I worked, right? Because they were doing it all the time. They told me how to download books and all that, right? So I think it needs to happen a lot more organically in the flow of work, and I feel that about the whole learning space, right? Stop sending people to boring classroom programs and just create conditions across the organization where people can naturally come and make it very, very interesting for people to do that. And it needs to be very need driven, you know. I mean, today a CEO or a leader doesn't really need an HR to drive a reverse mentoring program. If they are learners, they will go and sit with 23 years old who are doing interesting stuff in Bangalore and California on text to speech or speech to text conversion, which is very inspiring. So, and I don't mean to say that you only learn from young people. I think you learn from anyone who's agile and who's adopting technology rapidly, and that there is an opportunity of reverse mentoring there. I'm going to pause.
So,
Sorry, I'll just add simple
sure,
thing.
Pallab, yeah.
Where do you learn from today? If I was to give an larger smartphone, I'll have to ask my daughter how to use half of it.
True.
And
Half the times, I think we are asking our kids, okay,
so that's what reverse mentoring is all about. You go out, you meet your customers, you meet your employees. What is it that you are trying to do? You're probably trying to learn a little bit from them as well, and it's just so ingrained in everybody's life that probably I don't know how much structure is now required into this
Yes.
learning process.
Yes.
So that's my limited 2 bits. This pace of learning and etc. It's become a quite a talked about point. Now the thing is that I think Jeff Bezos, right? Bezos said that it's important to know what is not going to change. Okay, that people will want the things cheaper is not going to change. I want the iPhone 13
Definitely.
for free if possible, but and that's not going to change, right? I want it delivered at my home instead of going to the store. That's not going to change. I want it to be power packed with as much features as possible and have the flexibility of Android. That's not going to change, right? So I want as much as I want. So as long as our the changes that we are incorporating is aligned to fundamentals of what's not going to change, I think any project that you take up, the speed could be different. The speed could vary depending on the urgency. But as long as the fundamentals are focused on comfort, speed, choices, and the like, I think technology is going to make a huge impact on the organization.
So, the pandemics brought about all the three models, at the workplaces, remote working, in premises, and the hybrid model. So, in terms of the HR leadership, how are the organizations going to balance these three? Jyoti, if I could come to you, do you see all three sort of existing going forward? And in terms of the organizations, how would they be balancing if all these three will coexist?
I think, each to its own, if I may use, because every organization, every industry is very different in terms of how they function and how they want to function and how they want to adopt. Not everybody is embracing and not everybody is letting go of their old features. Even though technology has shown us that we can go ahead and have work from home and infrastructure costs can go down drastically, nobody is taking it or embracing it fully. I think with an empowerment culture, teams have started to speak up, which was never the case earlier. So employees would now state that I would want to work from home or whatever is the new thing that they want to. The voice is coming out. And that is what empowerment culture can bring about. And organizations or the leaders will have to sit and listen and then adapt to change rather than imposing a hybrid culture or everything. I think that kind of shift is what people will have to take, in my opinion. There's no one shoe that fits all. That wouldn't happen, but yeah, they will have to collaborate here.
Uh,
Deepshikha,
yeah,
Deepshika, we lost you.
yeah.
yeah.
Sorry. So if I could just come to you, Shuchika, on what just Jyoti just said, on the fact that, the employees are much more empowered to sort of exert their choice, or our organizations also, or, as a HR leader, our organization, do you see the willingness to sort of accept this empowerment, which is sort of coming about, which the disruptions have brought about?
Deepshikha, you're having this conversation when there is a term that's going around in the market called the Great Resignation. Okay, the talent war has been on for ever since I entered the workplace. It just doesn't stop. I don't know who's winning the war, but everybody seems to be equally in an equal quagmire on retention versus attraction. Uh, I think what has happened is employees always had a voice. They always were doing these conversations in water coolers. And as HR and as leaders, you always took employee survey and did your feedback. What technology has done is it's helped you do it just in time. So, pandemic came, everybody went on their Qualtrics and hyphen, and let's just go and do some surveys and figure out what people is wanting. And you got very real time, just in time data on what is needed, so you could focus your effort towards that. So I have never worked in an organization where leadership has said, I don't want to listen to employees. And I've never had situations where employees have said, I'm going to ask for the sun and the moon. So on an average, employees have been reasonable and leaders have been willing to listen. It's just that technology has now brought that data more real, more just in time. Yesterday I was experiencing a product on Microsoft Viva, and it can give you so much insights on your ways of working. If your Microsoft Teams, if you start just enable the button on Insights, it just tells you which meetings are you going to, which ones are you not going to, what are productive, what are not productive. So I think we are sitting in the midst of a lot of data, and that is empowering you. If we combine that with skill building around making sense of that data, I think more often than not, leaders are going to take the right actions in favor of employees. I just want to touch upon the different ways of working, or hybrid and work from home and work from office. And I agree with what Jyoti said. I also want to say that it is bringing up new challenges. And the issue is not who works from home and who works from office and who works hybrid. I think the entire issue is how quickly can you put in ecosystem around it. It has challenges of cyber security. How is the customer data being treated on my desktop? Who's seeing it? Who's not seeing it? It brings challenges around these different employee forms. How do you manage your contracts? How do you manage the whole infrastructure? Let me call it employee infrastructure around it. And the third piece is the missing out on water cooler conversations, the connections. I mean, how do you're onboarding drugs of people online, and they meet each other only on a screen. So at some stage you feel the need for connections. And I know when CEOs in of large organizations go and they say, okay, work from home is not working. I think that needs to be unpacked a little. I think what's not working is, how do you make the good old connection alive in this ecosystem? And I think those are new problems to be solved, rather than say this or that or that. I mean, and that will be largely driven by customer need. Customer wants you in office, you will do it. Customer wants you at home, you'll do it. So there is a bit of that. Deepshikha, I think it's time to ask somebody else a little bit around this as well.
So, Pallab, you with the financial sector. So, from that perspective, from your sector's perspective, remote working, in-premise working, hybrid model. How do you sort of really reach a balance? And what are the kind of challenges that you see, in all these three models? Is would it be workable?
So the thing is that we were part of essential services, so and we had to open up branches, you know, as per government mandates, right? So it was not possible for 100% remote working at beyond the point of time. So we did shift a lot of back-end roles to the homes, etc. Concerns of on what Shuchika mentioned around cybersecurity, on employee data, customer data, how's it going to be? How am I going to give him a bandwidth which allows documents to float around without seamlessly, um, availability of data bandwidths and stuff like that. Yes, those were some of the major concerns. Uh, as on time, we have shifted back largely to office because that and also because we are headquartered in Chennai, so that it's a little lesser affected at this point of time. So that allowed us to come back. And it starts like this. The branches are working on a physical mode, so therefore they want to talk to someone and they want a lot of their leaders available, and those things start happening. So then we got some parts of operations back and stuff like that. What I think will happen is, and the employee contracts, etc., will be rehashed, and things around that will happen. But what I think will happen is that anything which is purely output oriented, anything which is completely on a measurable basis, how many clicks, how many forms have been uploaded, etc., that will continue, or that has a large option of being not in office. But parts which require collaboration, parts which will require interaction, parts which will require cross-functional projects, those are areas which I think will slowly creep back into a common area where they could work. So that's my take on the subject. So yes, a hybrid model is what probably is going to stay. I maybe at some stage we will move to a full remote place. Maybe move to a full, kind of a workforce which is on your Rolodesk. That's what she talked about the talent war. Talent wars talked about how can you have more and more people on your Rolodesk, because you need people for a period of time, and then that skill, that competency might be better utilized for someone else, right? And I need something else. So that's how the talent is. That's how the mobility of talent is going to change. So yeah, so that's where we will come at eventually. But for the moment, I think at least for the banking industry, hybrid is the way to go.
So, Jyoti, in terms of the employees, we know these dynamics are changing and they are going to change. So, as an HR professional, what are the measures that the organizations are undertaking? What is it that they're doing to give comfort to their employees? And secondly, in terms of the changes in the leadership, to not just bring about these changes, but to ensure that these changes are more acceptable to the employees. The same kind of the workplace culture is retained. So, what are the kind of measures that organizations are really sort of undertaking?
I think, to be fair, this pandemic has really brought about an empathetic leader out from wherever the hibernation was. Because when we were in a physical environment, I think empathy quotients were a little bit taken for granted, if I may use the word. But empathy has come to the fore completely. And there is a huge way in terms of conversations that are happening with the employee, and understanding and empathetically understanding his space of work, his household where he is living, because we come from all strata, especially in India. We come from all strata, and people, especially in the banking sector, a feet on street lives in a place which is fully overcrowded and noisy, from to a place where you have the pedder roads of the world. So you have all that kind of strata living together, and that's where I think empathy has come to the fore, and lots of measures have been taken. We have gone overboard also to keep the employees engaged, but I think, having said that, that was basically required, that we went overboard to keep them in a good mindset. That's the reason even CHROs went overboard. It was, I don't think so. Many have said that it was just a tick in the box that HR did. I don't think so, because I think people really reached out. And that is what is the measures that I would say. The rest of the measures are very typical, but I think people reached out, people were empathetic, and those are the measures that are really required, and that connect happened. And that's a sustainable behavior that we have incorporated, at least in this pandemic, and it's here to stay. That's my take on this.
Okay, we're almost nearing the end of the slot that we were given. Thank you all for joining us for this fireside chat.